I want men to take responsibility.
I want every woman
for
in
their
New Zealand to know that.
I want women to
What do women want? We want to be equal. We want to be listened to. We want to be respected. And we want to be safe.
I think the next step in feminism is looking at how we experience being a woman differently. And women of colour in particular have a very different experience.
We are people who are competent, we've got agency, we've got skills, we've got so much to contribute. We want to be treated the same as everyone else.
I really want to live in a world that really embraces social compassion.
I want women to be properly paid for their valuable work.
I want the pay gap for women and men to stop.
I want to be hired for my qualifications and not my look.
I want stay-at-home mothers to be more valued.
I want women to be respected for the work they do and not the way they look.
I want women to be paid the same as men because we're just as valuable.
I want there to be a conversation in New Zealand about gender quotas and targets.
Here's a tricky question for you. How do you fix a massive problem that so many people don't even accept as a problem at all? That, incredibly, is the state of the pay equity debate. There are many New Zealanders who believe the pay gap is a myth. Surely we can all grasp the concept of equal pay for equal work is just and fair. And I wonder if Kate Shepherd was around today, is this what she would be fighting for? Pay equity. Usually it's happened to us all, right?
Yeah.
Bev, do you want to start?
Yeah, when I started in the workforce at 17 years old, I worked for a law firm, a Queen Street law firm actually, just in the accounts department, 17 years old, and took over from a young guy. The rate was $11,000. And I thought, this is fantastic, straight out of school, $11,000, brilliant. What I didn't realise for a few years after that was that in fact he was on $17,000. And back then, that was a lot of money.
You know, actually there's differences that come into play based on other demographic factors. I mean, I was a barrister, but it was always the men that would kind of ask to be categorised as being more senior, and as women we kind of were waited until we had, you know, we perceived ourselves to be good enough and all of that, because no one ever comes and tells us we're good enough. And so there wasn't that kind of mentoring. We just didn't rise. So we would be doing the same work, but we weren't categorised as being senior.
You know, one of the things that I would say really stands out to me, both as an artist and as a speaker, and a writer, and, you know, kind of a miscellaneous creative person, is that the number of times that I'm asked to do things for free is just staggering. And, you know, I'm a giving person, and I really love to try to give back and try to help people. But I also, you know, have a mortgage and have a living to make, and also have skills that deserve to be valued. And I have found one thing that's interesting. You know, I kind of expect sometimes that there'll be, you know, I've had lawyers and accountants ask me to sing particularly for things for free, and I've kind of thought, oh, you know, if I went into your office and asked for a consult, you know, do you think that maybe you'd give me an hour of your time in your law firm for free? Really good exposure, you know, I might do a little social media post about that. But, you know, so there's that. But what's really stuck in my craw is that actually often, the most often when I'm asked to do things for free, it's generally around women's empowerment. And it just clangs me over the head, because it's like, hey, newsflash, if you want to empower women, pay them. So that's kind of the main thing that stands out to me.
So oftentimes when we're talking about pay equity, we hear that women just need to ask more and then this problem will get solved. And so interestingly, my example is of a time when I was asking. I had been accepted to join the management team of a startup, and I needed to negotiate for the equity I would get. And so I did my research, and I knew what the market amount was for the level that the startup was at and the role that I was doing. And so came in and very clearly presented my case of, here's the amount that I think I'm worth, and here's the reasons why. And then after the meeting with the board, the CEO came back to me candidly and said, Lauren, they think you're too aggressive and you're too bossy. And now they're concerned about working with you and you coming into this role. And so I ended up having to go and do a lot of individual meetings with board members to show them that I'm amicable and kind and friendly. And it was a lot of extra work. And I realized that the advice that I'd gotten had been from men, and it had been strategies that do work really well for men. But ultimately what I had to do was read a lot about Sheryl Sandberg and other women and how they've done their negotiation processes, because the rules are different when women are doing it.
I think a lot of people don't understand the basic terminology, right? Pay equality, equity.
Really, pay equity is about valuing the people that we have on our team. And if someone finds out that someone else is doing similar work and getting paid more, that intrinsically means that someone feels devalued. And so in terms of the business case, you can see the implications for productivity. Unhappy people aren't as productive. You can see the implications for retention. If I don't feel valued in this workplace, well then I'm going to start looking for other companies that will value me. And so all of those then end up having financial implications for companies that aren't thinking about these topics.
Lizzie, the arts and entertainment, the music industry have their own problems with pay for women, don't they? Explain.
Well, there's a number of different issues there, but I think one of the key topics that I think gets missed in this discussion around pay equity and pay equality quite often is that of freelancers. And it's so difficult to have any kind of knowledge of what other people in your position are being paid, from different company to company, different contracts. It can be so variable. It's so competitive, and especially the industries that we've worked in with media and with me with music. A lot of young women are so vying to be in those industries that they don't really know when they're so young that they're just coming in. They don't really know how the game is played. So they're kind of ripe for exploitation. And there are very exploitative people in those industries, both professionally and also sexually. As a young artist, I kind of felt like, well, I so wanted to be in music that maybe I just have to put up with this, and this is just the way that it is. And I think that kind of mentality can very quickly break people down, and it's not good for the industry. It's such a volatile environment with so few checks and balances, and it's really difficult to know who to even go to ask for a pay rise or to stop that lecherous old dude from groping you.
And it's overt and covert, or covert and overt. Yeah. I know that in television the message is quite plainly, there is another woman younger than you that is ready. Absolutely. She's right there, ready to take your job, so don't complain. I need to come back to you, Goldrist, because you're the only one on the couch that's kind of in charge of public policy, I suppose, such as it is in your position.
Anyone who is in any kind of a group that suffers discrimination knows that as a member of that group you have to work 20 times, a million times as hard to prove that what you're experiencing is happening because of discrimination and not just because you're bad at your job or whatever. So without an independent oversight body, I think we have gone backward, because the fact of the gap is something that's in dispute now. We're not just talking about how to remedy it. But I mean, we had, Jan Logie had a bill, and it's still in the ballot at the moment, and she's now the in charge of sexual and domestic violence, so Undersecretary, Her bill was all about making sure that companies had to make salaries transparent so that people could negotiate with, that kind of footing, and that it would create sort of a natural oversight mechanism in a way. But we don't have that, and I think we have to take responsibility as the government to actually do something about this.
And there need to be teeth as well.
Absolutely.
Bev, you're in support of that idea of transparency, and I think you are too, Lauren, where everybody's in agreement on this. And other countries are doing this, aren't they, already?
Yeah. Lots of countries are already doing this, and a lot of Scandinavian countries have used this well out in advance and have had some incredible results because of it. How can we deny that it's going to bring women up to where they need to be? And some businesses have been absolutely transparent in their in their
Which
work.
means publishing salaries.
Yes, yes.
That's quite scary for some companies.
Yeah.
Should it be limited to companies over 100 people, with over 100 employees, or?
No, I don't think so. And look, some small businesses have been very happy to do it as well, but some large organisations, but also they've put some mandates around it. They haven't shown the package. They've shown the salary and not the package.
Going back to the transparency mechanism too, I think a piece within that that's even more helpful is when companies are very clear about the formulas that they're using to calculate the salaries. And so even if a company doesn't say this person makes this much, this person makes this much, if they say, look, our salaries are dependent on the type of role, the experience, the performance, then people can look at that and say, okay, first of all, is that how my salary was calculated based on this formula? And then we can start to have a conversation around, is that formula fair for everybody? And so then instead of these individual one-off negotiations where this person thinks their salary is off and it gets corrected, the conversation becomes one about the systems inside the company. And every time we're having that conversation, the improvements that we make are actually for everybody, for the benefit of everyone who's getting their salary set by that equation.
Bringing women into leadership positions, it's not happening as fast as probably it should. Bev, what do you say to a company when you go in there and you recognise that they do need more diversity and more women in leadership positions?
Instead of hearing we couldn't get candidates that met whatever standard, and so we've got more males coming through, or another male coming through into that senior role, or back into the management team, or up into the executive team, because there weren't enough women or no woman applied for the role. We're getting them to rethink what that role should look like. And we're also getting them to have another look at what that recruitment and selection process looks like. So when that panel comes together, so first of all, have a panel of people that actually have a look at the people coming through the recruitment process, and also have a look at the people coming through, the actual criteria for the role you're looking at. Why does it have to be this flavour? Why does it have to be this box? This person have to meet this criteria? Why can't we change what that looks like? That's how we're going to get divergent thinking in this organisation. That's actually going to change. It's actually going to bring innovation, creativity through. You're going to get a lot more women applying for these types of roles if you can change what that looks like.
Sort of following on from what Bev said, the piece I'm especially interested in is that piece around who's getting promoted upwards. And we know that we're losing lots of women along the way. We know that women are opting out of workforces when they see that there are blockages in front of them. And so one of the key things around that is who's getting the step-up opportunities. And unfortunately, one of the biases that we have for women and people of color and other marginalized groups is that when they do succeed, we often credit that success to the team or to luck or something beyond them. Whereas when it's a man or a white person and they succeed in a role, we say, oh, it's because they're more competent and they're really good at that. So specifically around that, it's in terms of things that organizations can do. One is around making sure that people across the board have access to senior leadership so that senior leaders can actually think of them and remember them and think of who should be getting those roles. And then also doing a review of what's the criteria for doing those step-up opportunities. So again, being really specific on the criteria, what actually matters for this. And then instead of an ad hoc, this is the first person that came to mind, let's have a clear process for who gets that step-up opportunity.
Lizzie, in your industry and the industries you've worked in, they sometimes look female-dominated. But they're not necessarily all the way through, are they?
No, I mean, what happens, I think, in a lot of industries, but particularly, I think, in media, you have, if you go into a newsroom, I mean, you would know this, you'll see lots and lots and lots of women, but the higher up the chain you go, the fewer women there are. And so basically any role that has power attached to it and responsibility is generally held by a male member of the team. There's kind of two pieces to this. One is that in the boys' club there's a whole lot of shoulder tapping. So there's, oh, you know, this role is coming up, you should apply for that, and I will have a word to so-and-so about that role. That's happening all the time in many industries, but particularly music. And then the kind of the flow-on effects from that just mean that we don't kind of have the same thing. We're not having women shoulder-tapping other women or men shoulder-tapping women to say, you should come into this role. And I think part of the reason why we're not having women shoulder-tapping other women potentially comes from this kind of deficit model that we're in that, you know, we are forced to compete against other women, you know, so massively, but basically kind of for survival a lot of the time. And that's particularly common in music. And a good example of that would be like, you know, a record label. And I've been in situations where this has happened, where they've kind of said, oh no, we've already got our one female artist for our roster, we don't need another one, we're not going to sign her. And the same thing happens at music festivals. Oh no, we've got 2 female bands on the bill, we don't need another one. And actually if we have another one, then you know, people won't want to listen to that, so it'll just be some screechy girly shit. And then actually, you know, you just end up with this situation where we're forced to compete against each other. So there's no sisterhood when you've got so little power available that you all have to basically slog it out against each other.
Goris, your party cannot be accused of not having enough women representatives, so we have to congratulate you on that. But how do we start to unblock that at a government? Like, what can government do?
Yeah, so people sort of cringe and squirm when we talk about affirmative action and making space and quotas, yeah, and that's this thing, you know, but actually that's the only way it's going to happen. It's a temporary measure until substantive equality is a reality, but meanwhile we actually do have to make that space.
Other great ideas for getting more women into leadership?
A couple key things, and these are strategies. I'm really interested in the strategies that forward-thinking companies can choose to do, because they're not going to wait for national policy or some of these bigger picture and really important things to happen. But there are a lot of companies that have said, well, we care about this for business reasons as well as moral reasons, and we're going to take these actions. And so 2 that I've seen be really effective are, 1, having clear mentoring programs in place, and that's not just senior women mentoring more junior women, because we know there's not many senior women. It's having senior people in general mentoring more junior people. And there's actually a benefit when it's senior men mentoring junior women, because through that mentoring relationship, they learn more about what it's like to be a young woman in an organization and some of those challenges. So that's the first one. The second one, and this is my personal favorite, and it goes back to the unpaid work conversation. Women, even in paid roles, are often doing a lot of unpaid work. And again, this is intersectional, so it's not just women, it's people of color. The people who are often cleaning up after parties, the people who are organizing birthday gifts and cards, that's all unpaid work, and it's much more often done by women and by people of color. And we expect them to do it as well. So we don't give them the same appreciation and thanks when they do it as when a man is doing it or a white person is doing it. And so companies that come up with thoughtful ways to make sure that those roles are shared are making sure that that unpaid labor is being distributed fairly, because no one's getting promoted based on the fact that they cleaned up after every single party that happened, unfortunately.
Kia ora. Thank you all for participating. This has been absolutely brilliant.
Women in New Zealand, on average, over a lifetime, earn 12% less than men do. That means that for every dollar he earns, she earns 88 cents. So obviously, Kate Shepherd shouldn't be on the $10 note. She should be on the $8.80 note. Seeing we're being paid 12% less, we should do 12% less. Let me walk you through it. So if you are working, for example, a 40-hour week, sisters, for 4.8 hours a week, drift off. Do nothing. stare into space. If anyone says, "What are you doing?" you say, "I'm having my lady time." If your job involves emails, I want you to delete 12 emails out of every 100 without reading them. Nothing bad will happen, truly. I've been doing it for a year. Nothing bad happens. If your job involves filing, alphabetizing of any kind, sisters, I want you to each choose for yourselves 3 letters of the alphabet that you will have nothing to do with. Take the problem home, right? Take the problem home. This is how we have always affected social change throughout human history. You make the political personal. So at home, if you're cooking dinner, don't cook one of the vegetables properly. If anyone says the potatoes are a bit hard, you say, yes, they are. It's a political statement. Here's how we get pay equity by Christmas. This is what we do. When things get a little bit frisky in the bedroom, stop at 88%. Apparently it's the last 12% they really like. Thanks very much. Have a fantastic night.
We have appalling statistics in this country when it comes to family violence. The fact that so many women can't even count on being safe in their own homes is, well, it's a national disgrace, isn't it? You really can't call it anything else. And we want to be able to leave our homes and walk at night in safety without wondering whether we're going to be accosted or raped or murdered at any moment. It's a real fear, and we want to be able to live without that fear. And at work, we want to be able to come to work and do our jobs and pursue our careers in safety without being harassed or preyed upon. Is that too much to ask? New Zealand has the worst rates of family and intimate partner violence in the developed world. Incredible, isn't it? We have brought together this panel of amazing women who've seen that with their own eyes and can talk to us about methods and fixes, I guess, that might even change your life or save your life. Before we get started, let's hear from 2 very courageous women.
I want men to take responsibility for their anger. On my 21st birthday, I had these teeth punched out from my ex-partner.
I fled the house in pyjamas with no shoes on. There would have been no point in staying around and trying to reason or trying to say to him, calm down. He had gone.
I went back to him and back to him.
You have no self-esteem. You're robbed of anything, any strength within yourself. You're worried how you're going to survive outside of this environment that's already so toxic and so frightening.
And the life cycle is still going around.
There is no darkness so dark that a ray of light can't seep through. The moment you speak out to someone else, you've let that little bit of light come in. That light can only grow, and other people will help you get to that next stage, and you will build from that. I want women to come out and be supported, not afraid, ready to speak out and know that they're going to be heard.
Deborah, I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind. Given that we have the worst stats in the world for this, you would think we would have developed some of the best systems to deal with it. But we don't even really know that much about the experience of individual women.
Yeah, I think in New Zealand we're really good at saying it's not okay, but we're not really good at saying what it is, and we're not really very good at all at responding to it. And we know that only 20% is reported to the police. So 80% is we don't know anything about women and children in those situations. And it's an even higher rate for sexual violence as well, of non-reporting. So the responses that we have at the moment in New Zealand are really fragmented. And people work in silos and don't really talk to each other about creating a sort of national response, a way that we can really wrap around women and children and help them towards safety. So that's a huge reason why we set up Backbone Collective, because we felt like if we want to address these terrible statistics in New Zealand and we want to help women and children be safer, we need to find out from them, actually, how does the system work and what do they need in order to be safe?
Katrina, tell us why you hit the headlines in the past couple of months.
Well, I made public comments criticising a judge who had imposed an extremely inadequate sentence in a domestic violence case late last year, and a man assaulted 3 people and was granted a discharge without conviction. And I've been involved in domestic violence work for 20 years and I'm well aware of the penalties, and that was just very lenient. But what was particularly concerning was the comments made by the judge, which were incredibly victim blaming, and he said that the woman had done no credit to herself with her actions, and he then said that many people would have done what the male perpetrator did, even though it's against the law, and that's just completely inappropriate and unacceptable for a judge to say that. I would have liked the Law Society to come out and say what I said, because as lawyers we've got a duty to promote respect for the justice system and uphold the rule of law. And if we just support everything judges say, even when the public and the community can clearly say that the judge is in the wrong, I don't think that does uphold the justice system.
Most of these women would not want to go, as I know in the work that I've been doing for the last 6 months, they don't necessarily want to go on the record. So you set up something where they could safely bring their information to you?
Yeah, so mostly it's not safe for women to speak out as individuals about their experience of violence and abuse, particularly if they're in the family court. They can get into a lot of trouble and be punished for years for speaking out. So what we tried to create was this safe, anonymous conduit so that women could just take part in online surveys. We're very much a virtual organisation, and report back about what their experiences in the system has been. And then we can write reports and flag the issues and advocate on their behalf as a collective for much needed system change.
Katrina, as a lawyer, what is your take on women stuck in violent family situations and the way they are treated by the justice system?
I completely agree with what Deborah's saying. The family court deals absolutely inadequately with domestic violence. What happens when women and children come to the family court for protection? Actually, they're not believed and the violence is minimised and denied. We should be believing what the mums and the children are saying.
Ruhine, Ronnie, if I may call you that, protection orders should protect people, surely, do they?
Nope. No, I haven't been an advocate for protection orders. I learned at a really early stage of when I started as an advocate. I believed what was on the paper. So as I walked through with the woman, there are different stages that say criteria that you can't do this and you can't do that, and this is what will happen. You can call the police and become arrested and go through court. Well, no. First you've got to get the police there, if there's even that. So after the first couple of times of getting let down for me, for the woman, because I was the one that was walking her through the process, I didn't want to walk her through because they don't work. There has to be a whole heap of things that she has to prove. And if it's emotional and mental abuse, you can forget it. Women are often asked, you need to be protecting your children, otherwise we'll take them away. And that comes from either it's been oranga tamariki, child youth and family, or whatever they're called, they're still the same. And it's really disheartening because it doesn't change. And I've been here 32 years in this work, and all this goodwill that people talk about, it actually doesn't work for the woman herself, and it needs to.
As the head of the Waikato Women's Refuge, can you talk us through what happens when a woman comes to you in crisis?
We're the largest refuge, unfortunately, and we have something like 80 to 90 cases a week. And so a woman will be brought through, we have to assess her to see where she fits, whether she wants to come into the community or stay in the community, or whether she wants to come into residential. I'm always an advocate for having the woman come into our safe house.
Are they always ready to acknowledge what's happened to them?
No. Often, because you don't get into the relationship with those tactics first. I mean, the partner, if he showed her those tactics and those behaviours earlier, it'd be like, hello, we're not getting in a relationship together. But that doesn't happen. It's always the love triangle, and it's after a time, some of those things start, breaking down. So if the partner is continuously putting down, isolating, using emotional abuse, mental abuse, it wears down because you're isolating from family, you're isolating from your friends, and sometimes she does not see that. Often for me, when I used to recite to the woman I was in the front line, when I'm on the front line now, no one lets me on the front line, because I'm always wanting to look at finding the man straight away. I want to see whether there's an opportunity to make a change and a difference. Are you willing to change your behaviour, or are we going to go like this again? So I'll know which way then to work with the woman.
Whānau obviously can be a massive help to a woman who's going through a crisis like this. They can also be a hindrance to the woman ever coming to you in the first place.
Yes, they
Right.
can. If they don't have the understanding about why you keep going back, we're supporting you over here, we'll do this, this and this, and you still keep going back to him 10, 15, 20 times, they give up.
Anjum, do you see similar problems with whānau and community?
I think one of the things that you find with many ethnic communities is that because there's such a high level of negativity, and at the moment, and it's around the world, we've got this huge discourse around immigrants and so on, and the way that wider discourse plays out is that communities hunker down, and anything that's going to lead to more intensive attention towards that community, they want to shut that down. And so what you find is that therefore they don't want the woman to report, because as soon as it goes to the police, it becomes a much more public matter.
And everybody gets blamed.
And everyone gets blamed.
Community.
And so the kind of support that a healthy and normal community that wasn't having to face this kind of negativity all the time, that kind of support just isn't there. And it really does work against the victim, because not only does she have all the normal pressures that other women face, but she's also facing a community that is actively encouraging her to stay there, to not talk about it. And that isn't just with domestic violence, it's also very strong with sexual violence as well, is this need for the community to protect itself, because they know that they're all going to face the consequences if it gets out.
They don't always want to leave the marriage, do they?
A lot of women, they don't, because of cultural factors, because of isolation or not knowing people here, and you're not able to become financially secure because you're discriminated against in the job market, then your prospects and your thoughts of what your life could be post leaving the relationship are that much more limited.
Gabrielle, you're from Taumarunui. Are rural women particularly at risk?
Yeah, because, 40 k's away, well, it's going to take the police 2 hours to get there. No neighbours to help you, no neighbours to hear. So, yeah, I don't think we really get a look in with the rural stuff.
How do you deal with that, Ronnie?
It's dangerous. Like in early days, it was a lot easier for us to rock up in different parts, but you knew that there was probably more weapons like guns, because farmers have guns. But these days, you've got pea as well that you're having to deal with.
So how long does it take you to get to the side of a woman who needs help? And how much would you like to reduce that time?
It can take the next day. It's really up to the police. If they make contact with us, then we should have the opportunity to get to every high-risk case once it's made safe. In old days, we didn't wait for the police. We went there and we just had 2 or 3 of our family that were carted as well for protection, and our dogs, and then we were able to...
Took your chances.
Yeah. Well, you do. You're still creative. That's why they won't let me in the front line.
I can't see that, yeah. Gabrielle, you work with the police, you have done for 35 years. There's a new app that the police are using that allows women to record their interview on the spot in the home while the issue is fresh, I guess. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, that's the new 5F app. It's being trialled at the moment. That will just make the woman tell her story once, directly into the phone. We also, on that app, we do safety planning. The officer can't leave the scene without having done a safety plan with the victim. Obviously depends on whether or not the offender is located or not, and roll on to refuge support services and things. Any high risk, we must follow up within 72 hours. So
overall,
we're
things getting better.
Yeah, we're trying. Yeah, trying to move the ambulance up the cliff a bit.
Obviously, the reporting rate is still way too low, and I suppose the conviction rate is way too low as well. What needs to happen between that point and the courts to improve things?
Just about everything.
At least getting to the cases and then forwarding them out to the specialist groups first within half an hour. We're pushing half an hour all the time for every case that's in Hamilton.
You want to be within 30 minutes of every case?
Yeah, we want to do that.
What kind of resources do you need for that, Ronnie?
Well, you need a full team set of, like we've got 42 staff at the moment. We probably need another extra 10 to be able to do that rotation for 24/7.
Because the fallout from it is absolutely huge, isn't it? It's in the billions of dollars, and if we could change a wee bit of stuff, we could put a bit of that money to a better use.
Yeah, maybe we could, I know this is really out there, but take a little bit away from the Rugby World Cup in the Americas.
Oh,
it would never happen.
I can tell you'd be on board with that, Deborah. What would
Yeah,
you like to
definitely. Well, I was just saying, our system is only as strong as the weakest link. So even if you enhance the crisis response and you have a fully resourced refuge support services, if you have one part of the system that isn't part of it, and like the family court, for example, works completely outside of the police, the social services, the hospital, even outside of the criminal jurisdiction. If you have one part of the system working outside of that, it pulls everything else down. And that's what Backbone has been concerned about exposing for the last 18 months.
There are some amazing things happening, of course, and we need to acknowledge that. Gabrielle, you're otherwise known as Dr. Phil, aren't you? Because of the couch in your office at the police station in Taumarunui. You've been working in this area for years and years. How did you get into it?
I was working at the police station in the charge room, and I was tasked with trying to sort out our horrendous domestic problem that we had. So as the people came through, I basically said, "We're sick of your crap, are you sick of it?" And they surprisingly said yes. So I targeted what I considered to be our 5 worst couples, pitched them for lethality, potential lethality.
Somebody was going to die.
Yep, and also the number of call-outs that we were getting. And just began working with them, walking alongside them. No problem was too hard. Once they were well on the way to recovery, shall I say, we would take them away for a residential weekend camp with some good quality speakers and people there.
We will get to those speakers in just a second. I want to ask you though, when you approach a couple like that and you say, "We're sick of your crap," what is it that makes them take that step?
I think mainly the children. I'll often sort of pitch it at them, do you want your son or daughter to be sitting where you are in 15 years? And most of them don't.
And that's enough?
Yeah, and often that's enough.
The residential program you were talking about, you started with your dear friend Celia Lashley, didn't you?
Celia came along and worked with the woman at every camp. At first we had no money to pay her, and she just kept on coming. She did every single camp, and yeah.
You might have heard that there is a new movie that's been made by journalist Amanda Miller about Celia. It's simply called Celia, and it is incredible. If you haven't seen it yet, please do. Here's a little taste.
At the heart of my being is the plight of women. This society that we spend millions of dollars on benefit, millions of dollars trying to stop child abuse, millions of dollars trying to stop family violence, and no one has said, turn to the mothers. And so that's my thing. It is only in working with the mothers that we will get to save the lives of these children.
We lost Celia, which is still a dagger to all of our hearts, really. You had big plans with her, didn't you?
Our vision was we were going to set up a long-term residential camp where we would take 10 family units from across New Zealand at a time. We'd settled on a 12-week to coincide with the school term so the children would be integrated locally into schools, etc. However, when Celia died unexpectedly, that kind of probably knocked the wind out of my sails a little bit for the large residential, but we still continue with our normal one that we do once a month.
Well, kia ora for the work that you do, and all of you. Can I get one thing from each of you that you would do to change the game with domestic violence? Ronnie, let's start with you.
I want all the political parties to collaborate together in unity to be able to look at understanding the analysis and knowledge around family violence, sexual violence. Every 3 years comes, we dread it, the families dread it, NGOs dread it, the government officials dread it, because everything is taken away or it's chopped and changed. So we don't go anywhere. That's why in 32 years, really, there's been little change. And I'd like to see some change in that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I agree with you. One thing that I'd really love to see happen is for people in authority and people who design policy and programs and have bright ideas to ask women and children who've experienced violence and abuse, what do you need? Let survivors be at the centre of every design, implementation and review, and make that just part of what we do all the time to make sure that things are going to make a difference. Don't keep sinking money into stuff that we don't know if it's going to make any difference or not.
Anjum.
I think for us at the Ethnic Women's Centre, one of the key aspects of our work is actually building networks for these women, connecting them to each other and building the support systems that they don't have. And we do it by having this whole suite of programs where women can just come and learn and laugh together and be together. I think that's really important.
I think it's education. Education provides confidence to make change, and people will effect change when they're well informed. And also speeding up of processes. It drags on and on and on, the court process, be it criminal or family. For people, it's just too long. Their lives are on pause.
Stop calling domestic and sexual violence women's problems. It's not actually domestic violence, it's male intimate partner violence against women, and men are the perpetrators and they need to sort this out. Until men actually start to care about it, nothing is going to really change.
From what I'm hearing of this panel, the police are doing a lot better, perhaps, than they were 10 or 15, 20 years ago. The NGOs and the groups that are directly helping women are doing a wonderful job, but are under-resourced, underfunded, need more help, and the courts more widely are a bit of a mess. That be right? Please thank our panel on domestic violence.
You get a bit of room for a man around here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great occasion tonight for me and Ken here to be at this historical meeting. That's right. Not too many men out there though, Ken, I don't think. No. How many men are here tonight? Yeah. Good on you, boy. Good on you. Hey, you poor bastard. Yeah. What do you do, buddy?
Rape prevention education.
He works for rape prevention. Good on you, boy. You are a bloody hero. Yeah, that's You're a bloody hero, because you know what? It's not the woman that need to fix it. It's you bloody fellas that need to fix it. That's right. It's a men's problem. We've got a message for the blokes out there in New Zealand, because we want New Zealand to be the safest place in the world. Here's a little poem. She's waiting for you to listen to her. She's waiting for you to listen to her. You need to stop abusing women, physically, mentally, and emotionally. You need to stop taking drugs. You need to stop smoking poison. You need to stop abusing alcohol. You need to get your shit together. Tell her that you love her and support her. Protect her and be a good example to your kids. Teach your sons to respect women and teach your daughters to be courageous and confident. Tell other men to stand up. She's waiting for you to listen to her. She's waiting.
She's waiting.
She's waiting.
She's waiting.
She's waiting. Okay, let's party. Hit that music, buddy. This is for the dames. From the dames. We're untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. Untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. We're untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. We're untouchable, untouchable girls. We're untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. We're strappy, we're aggressive, we'll take over the world. We're untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. We're untouchable, untouchable girls. We don't let anybody touch our brains. We won't ever, ever plug into the mains. And we are overtaken on a single lane. We're untouchable, untouchable girls. We're untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. We're strappy, we're aggressive, we'll take over the world. We're untouchable, untouchable, untouchable girls. We're untouchable, untouchable girls. 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 We live in a world that doesn't care too much. You got to stand up. You got to have guts.